Hello, and welcome to Come to Think of It. My name is Steve Nemerovsky, and I'm your host. I'm very excited about this episode because you're going to meet one of the most important and fascinating people in the world of government and politics, but you've never heard of, Leslie Graves. Leslie founded and grew Ballotpedia into a top 100 domestic website, particularly during election cycles. As you've come to learn from prior episodes, Ballotpedia is the leading source for accurate and unbiased reporting of American government and politics. In an earlier episode, we produced a tutorial on Ballotpedia that I highly recommend. Today, we're going to the top of the org chart to discuss an issue of great and rising importance in the American political landscape, the role and function of school boards. Whereas many people can barely name their governor or U.S. senators, I'm guessing almost no one can name their school board members. Yet education is among the most important tasks, if not the most important task of any society. And given the test scores, one at which we are not very good. School boards have become highly politicized over the past few years, especially post-COVID, when we learned of many poor decisions that greatly impaired students' learning potential. Leslie began a fascination with school boards many years ago and has set a goal of covering every school board election in the country. The Hall Pass e-newsletter on Ballotpedia is a leading source for all things school board. She recently commissioned a study to gain perspective on how they function, or don't function, that we're about to discuss. Leslie, welcome to Come to Think of It.
Thanks, it's great to be here. I'm excited to talk about school boards.
I know you are. But I'm going to limit you to a half hour. You don't get an hour today. I know you've been fascinated with school boards, and I guess I want to start there. What prompted the fascination with school boards?
When I would go into my polling place to vote in November, I would vote the top of the ballot, and I would still get down, as this happens to everybody, the bottom of the ballot, and I would look at them, and I would think, I've never heard of those names before. If that was happening to me, it happens to everybody. So we really want to change that. So to do that, there are many different things we have to do, and that was in the back of our mind, but it wasn't an urgent priority. And then, as you say, when COVID hit and many schools closed, there emerged a national dialogue about the schools that was quite a bit more, over the next couple of years after that, quite a bit more impassioned than it had been in my entire adult life. So that really lit a fire under us to start covering school board elections. A couple more things about school boards. There are 13,500 elected school boards across the country. That's a lot of school boards to cover. And there are altogether, sitting on those boards, there are 83,000 school board members. So covering them so that everybody, no matter where they live in the United States, can discover information about this person running for school board or that person is a large task, but we're chipping away at it.
Well, it's more than just elections, though, because you do have the Hall Pass newsletter.
Yep.
Talk a little bit about the impetus for starting the Hall Pass newsletter and the types of things viewers could discover if they subscribe to it.
Sure. So we, as voters and members of the public, we tend to hear about certain topics that school boards fight with each other about, or fight with, have conflict about. Some of the things that, if I were to ask you, Nemo, what are things that are top of mind for that? People would talk about whether they're banning books. They would talk about whether the schools should have closed during COVID, just things that have made it to the top of the heap. But it turns out that there are actually many dozens of topics that get debated on school boards. So in Hall Pass, which comes out once a week, we pick one of the issues of controversy and tell our readers kind of the pro or the con, so that people can see how both sides of the issue, or all the sides if there's more than two, how they stack up about that issue and what the arguments are that they use. And then we have a ton of content on upcoming school board elections, because school board elections are held almost every week of the year. And when people think about elections, they think about November elections. We are covering school board elections 50 out of the 52 weeks of the year, because states, generally speaking, allow school districts to pick the date of their school board elections. So it's kind of the wild, wild west as to when your school board elections will be in your district.
And I actually think that's a very unfortunate thing about school boards. I haven't studied school boards per se of late, but there was a time when I was looking at this. And in those days, and I'm sure it's true now, often less than 20% of the voters turn out for a school board, sometimes as low as only 15%. So if 20%, so if 20% turn out, that means that roughly 10% are voting for the winner. So this is a critical election. It has to do with the education of our children, but the people that get on the school boards are often winning with 12% of the vote, 13% of the vote.
Yep, that's right. And actually in a number of places, it's less than 10%. So there are big school districts in Texas that we looked at recently where the voter turnout was 7%. So, right. So school boards are and how the public schools are governed where you live is often something that people just take for granted until and unless there's a problem. And then they don't really know many people don't really know how to navigate it or what they can do about it. It's also really hard if you look at your school district and you feel that you'd like change to occur, it's really hard for change to occur because in addition to the fact that most of the elections are held on odd weeks of the year, like in April, May, June, et cetera, usually there are 7 or 9 people on the school board and the elections are staggered. So it takes a long time to change the ideological composition or whatever other kind of composition you care about on your school board. So it's a long haul process, but we really want to introduce our readers to these great people who sit on school boards because it turns out they're really fascinating. There are 83,000 of them. So even though we want to tell the story at scale, we recently did a project that took us a year where we picked 100, we recruited 100 school board members across the country. They were from 37 different states and did very detailed hour-long interviews with each of the 100 to see where they were coming from on some key issues. And what we learned was...
before we go there, I know you're on a roll. Before we go there, I want to just slow down and talk about how you decided you wanted to do this study. And then I want you to talk about how you designed the study in terms of how you wanted to gather the information. Let's do the process part first, and then we're going to jump into the substance.
Sure. So if you're going to talk to school board members, you can talk about a lot of different things. But we didn't want to interview them to find out how do you think about closing some of the schools in your district or some of the normal things. We wanted to go a little bit deeper. And the issues that we were most interested in is how do you manage conflict on your board? So conflict is going to arise, and we tend to think about the chance that conflict will arise because there might be some progressives on the board and then some conservatives, and then naturally there would be conflict, is how we might think about it. It turns out that there are many other things that you could have conflict about on a school board, but what we really wanted to know is whether after a conflict emerges on a board for whatever reason, whether the board is able to get past that as a board and move forward and start solving problems together again. So we really dug into that issue with people. We also wanted to know how all of these board members saw their role. You had brought up academic achievement a little earlier. How do you see your role as a board member in knowing about and addressing academic achievement issues in your district? What do you think your job is with respect to that? And the third thing we wanted to find out from them is what they think most journalists and voters don't know about them that they wish that they did know about them. So we dug into those issues. And from the very first interviews that we did, we realized this was going to be quite interesting because some of the school board members started crying during the interview. And what we found is that although we had people from all different ideological predispositions that we were interviewing, it didn't matter what their ideology was when it came to these deeper issues.
And again, just to go back to the process, you didn't self-select size of school boards. You didn't self-select you decided not to have a questionnaire. You did decide to have hour-long interviews. Let's just do a little bit more on the process side of how you decided to design this.
Yeah, so one of the things that we really wanted to do is because our staff, which has about 85 people these days, since they were going to start covering school board elections more and more, and since most of our staff has never spoken with a school board member or attended a school board meeting, like most American adults have not done either one of those things either, we wanted to expose our staff to a school board member. All of these interviews were done by our staff, and we distributed amongst them. So that was one big thing we wanted to do is get our people thinking more about who are these people and get to know them. Admittedly, if you only know one school board member, that's only one, but it's still more than zero. So our staff loved doing these interviews and felt like they developed a deeper understanding of what motivates these people to serve their community this way.
So,
So that was one of our big objectives. Yeah, go
okay,
ahead.
so you designed the study, you had roughly 100 interviews, one-on-one, lasted about an hour each, and you had the
Yep.
areas of concern you've already identified. I'm going to do kind of like a 10,000 foot level. Let's dive down a little bit. Three 10,000 foot level questions, I guess. Most interesting thing you learned from the survey?
Yeah, the most interesting thing is that the some school boards are not able to get past conflict. Some of them are. So we had people who would say, "Yeah, our board has just 7 people on it, and four of them are progressive and 3 are conservative, and we fight about stuff, but then we all go out and have a drink at the bar afterwards, and I just love them. We love each other." That was a story we heard from some school boards. Other school boards have fallen into a sad situation where they were not, whatever the conflict was, and it has nothing to do with their ideology, where they have not been able to come back together and work together productively as a board. And that and that again, that does not track with what their ideology is, and that really made me think that even though if you run for school board, or if you are visiting with somebody who came and knocked on your door and asked for you to vote for them for school board, we try to find out what kind of a personality style that person has in terms of being able to move past conflict and really deal with people of all different kinds of political philosophies. But in a way, in terms of serving the community and serving the kids in that community, it almost really feels to me as if their conflict management style matters more than where they're coming from politically. That was surprising to me.
Okay. You just used the word surprising. I was gonna have two different questions for you. One was the most interesting thing you learned, and the second was the most surprising. Are they the same?
Well, the other thing that struck me is that probably about 70% of the school board members that we interviewed were very clear on knowing what the academic achievement stats and data and whatnot is for their district, and felt like they were on top of it in a meaningful way, and were getting good information from the superintendent and the staff. About 30% of them did not feel that way. They felt like they found it confusing. They didn't understand how the data was presented. They felt like they had to squeeze it out of the superintendent. They felt like they were not therefore able to effectively manage or push any levers to improve academic achievement. So that was interesting. You'd think you'd want it to be 100% of school boards that know exactly what's going on with that and have some good ideas on how to manage the future, right? But that's not the case.
Now, I would think most school boards, and contrary to a lot of legislatures, they have certain things they must get done every year. They must pass a budget every year. They maybe
Right.
must does the calendar every year. I don't know all the things that they must do. Is this conflict arising out of must-do functions, or more the sporadic new political world of functions that are coming up, like you mentioned, book banning, or can girls and boys share bathrooms? Is it these new controversial type issues that are driving conflict, or is this an across the board thing?
It's other stuff. I mean, obviously, conflict does arise over that, and when you read a article in the major national media about a school board erupting in conflict, that's what it's going to be about. But most of the conflicts that we heard about were things like the the student population in the district had shrunk by 8%, which, by the way, is happening in every school, nearly every school district in the country. So the population is shrinking because birth rates are going down and so forth. So if your number of students in your district declines by 5, 8%, whatever, it declines by 12% in some districts, you're going to have to face closing schools. You're going to have to close some elementary schools or some junior highs. And the emotional attachment that communities have to those elementary schools, of course, as you can think about it, is extremely high. Everybody wants to be able to send their first grader 3 blocks down to walk to school. It's very emotional and it's very important to people, and of course that is only to be expected. And so when a school board needs to make a closing decision, that can lead to long-term resentment and angst that they have, in some cases, have not gotten past yet.
Now, I
So
know you
school,
serve on many boards yourself, have a lot of experience in this arena. I'm not on many, but enough. But I've also been an attorney serving, legal
yeah.
counsel to boards. And often it's the chairperson is making the difference in these things. Was that highly discussed in your survey, the role of the chairperson, how that person gets chosen, how long their terms are, and how that affects the operation of the board?
That's a really good question, and I agree with you that if somebody's going to notice that we as a team, we as a board are not working well together to help the kids here, it should be the chairman of the board, the chairperson of the board. I will say that one of the interviews that I did was with the chairperson of a board in a fairly large, quite a large school district, and she felt that she was in a situation where she felt big controversies had erupted 3 years ago over school closings. They still hadn't resolved them. And so she said, when you walk into the school board meeting, you're looking at people and you feel like some of them are your enemies. You know how that feeling, there's coldness. And what she wanted to do was a offsite retreat, get everybody off in in the wood, cabin in the woods for 2 days with a facilitator and try to work past it. But that did not happen. Now, one of the reasons that didn't happen is because when people run for school board in the United States, essentially you're a volunteer. Maybe you get $200 a month, if that. There are plenty of school districts where you don't even get that. And what your commitment that you're making is to go to the school board meetings and maybe go to some subcommittee meetings. You're not making a commitment to leave your family. Most of them have families, to go off to a cabin in the woods with your other school board members and try to work out your issues. So to a certain extent, it seems to me that systematically boards that enter into choppy waters there aren't very many good available structures in place to help them get past that. I mean, obviously, everybody that's been married for a period of time knows that if you get into a conflict and you just can't get past it, at least you can go to marriage therapy. You can do something like that. The options for school boards are more limited, right?
And again, I think it was Tip O'Neill said all politics is local. This is the most local of all politics. Often these meetings are held in the gymnasium or the boardroom of the school. If it is a heater issue, a lot of people from the community are there. So there's not a lot of separation even physically within the room. It is a heater issue. I've heard, voices and the passion can get really expanded. And I don't think these people are probably trained for those particular scenarios.
I agree, and so I don't know what the solution is, but I do think just like in a family where mom and dad are at each other's throat, maybe their kids are not doing so well. This is also true of school boards. If the school board is clawing at each other and kind of hating each other and feeling very cold toward each other, then that's not good for the kids in that district. Because they're not solving whatever the problems are, and believe me, there are an infinite number of problems that school boards are having to solve for the betterment of the kids in that district.
Now, for your survey, in the general summary, you talk about 6 deep dives that you did. So there are 6 areas that you wanted to do a particular deep dive in.
Mm-hmm.
2 of them that really jumped out at me is that the school board members wish that voters and the media understood them better and what their roles are. How was this presented, and what was your takeaway from that topic or that response?
Well, I'm sort of oversimplifying here, but most of the school board members felt that in one way or another, people, the voters, and also journalists have no idea what it's like to be a school board member and how much work it is, and the things that they have to confront. So they feel misunderstood. And that would suggest that groups like Ballotpedia, who are setting our foot on the path of covering these elections and covering these school districts, we need to be attentive to understanding what the world looks like from the point of view of a school board member, what their challenges are, what they're trying to cope with. But yeah, no, they feel really misunderstood. And one of the main things I would say that is the reason for that is, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. In every community, no matter how small, there are a number of squeaky wheels. And of course, if you're a school board member, you're getting the phone calls from the squeaky wheels, wherever they're coming from, whatever their deal is, you're getting the calls from them. And you probably have a pretty good sense that whatever it is that the squeaky wheel is worried about may not be the thing that is of the most broad need or interest for the kids in the district as a whole. They need safe schools. They need to have great academics so that they can progress. They need ways for the teachers to be happy and learning and becoming better teachers every year. Most of the things that squeaky wheels in a community are worried about are not those things.
And you mentioned a topic here, and I know you're not mentioning things in any particular order, but maybe one of the most important of all is the safe school idea. And certainly until the last decade, and then it gets worse and worse and worse, I think the buck is stopping here for school boards and trying to figure out how to keep our kids safe. And that's got to be a very difficult concept.
Yeah, and also that is another one where you might predict that the progressives on the board versus the conservatives might be at loggerheads with each other. That I don't necessarily think that's really true. Admittedly, 4 or 5 years ago, there was a bit of a national move in some larger districts to not have policemen or law enforcement officers in the schools anymore, in the high schools anymore. That is not. Sorry about this. That is not the anymore that discipline issue. I think almost most districts now do believe they need to have some form of public safety officer or law enforcement in their high schools. So the pendulum has shifted there, but what form that takes, how many of them there are, but to the extent that the country is sort of at loggerheads and children have had an unusual experience because they weren't in school for a year or two because of COVID, naturally there are more discipline issues, especially in middle schools and high schools, and exactly what you're supposed to do about that so that the great majority of the kids are able to continue on a productive learning journey. That's a hard problem to solve. And, you need to roll up your sleeves and go to work on it and figure it out. And having, so the top of the line issues that people might have about, well, we don't want cops in the schools, or yes, we do need cops in the schools. It's harder and deeper than that.
So another one of these deep dives dealt with the notion of what responsibility the school board has for academic outcomes. And I know that may change from district to district, because maybe the most important decision the board makes is who to hire as the superintendent. Then the superintendent's decision is who to hire as the principals. Their decision is who to hire as teachers. It all kind of flows downhill, I guess. Yet, in a time when our academic performances across the board in reading, writing, arithmetic are so dismal, how is this playing out at the school board level?
Yeah, one of the leading school public education reformers has suggested that you can analyze how well a school board is doing in terms of being a positive force for improving academics in the district by looking at their minutes of the board meetings over the last year or two and calculating what percentage of the time they ever talked about academic achievement issues. And it's true that if you look at the 13,500 school districts and you look at the minutes of a number of them, they spend 0 to 5% of the time talking about what we can do to improve academic achievement here. So I would say that getting away from the idea that that's a superintendent's job, they have to that's what we hired them for, and maybe having more of a focus on the school board, spending 50% of its time talking about academic achievement and setting academic achievement goals, because you can't boil the ocean. It might be that the second graders in your district in 40% of the schools are not reading at grade level. Maybe that's the area that you as a school board want to focus on. Or maybe you want to worry about the algebra scores of seventh graders, whatever, but you cannot fix all academic achievement issues overnight. So you're going to need to have priorities. Those priorities are going to show up in the budget, and that is the school board's business to be involved in that, collaborating on it with the superintendent. But they really need to spend time on that in their board meetings.
Okay, so talking about academic achievement, you've now done this study, which we're going to tell people in a few minutes how to find if they want to do a deeper dive of their own. We started at the beginning talking about the newsletter that you developed, the Hall Pass. What have you learned about school boards from this that's going to help you improve the product that you're presenting to your public?
If I really, if I were the king of the universe and I really wanted to make things better for all the students.
Well, for Hall Pass, you are the king of the universe.
There are 60 million kids, by the way, in America right now who are K through 12 age. So that we're talking about 60 million kids. About 8 million of them are in private schools of one kind or another. So we've got 52 million kids in public schools. I would think about ways to support school board members so that they can do their job, to make it easier for them to do their jobs well. They don't really get any support, in my never to be humble opinion, so I would think about that.
So we talked about the survey, we talked about Hall Pass. I want to educate the viewers here for a bit here. Mm-hmm. If they want to do a deeper dive, they've heard from you. How do they find the survey, study it, and then maybe even communicate with you on the survey? Walk us through that.
So that would be great. The easiest way for any of your listeners to access the survey is to just go to the front page of Ballotpedia, ballotpedia.org, and we've got a tile. You have to poke around on the tiles on the front page for that study, and then they can just click on it. It'll take them to the study. Okay. That is the easiest way. Yep.
All right. Hall Pass, which we should mention, is free. All newsletters on Ballotpedia are free. Mm-hmm. It's a weekly newsletter. If they want to get the Hall Pass, how are they going to sign up for that?
Yeah, so again, if you go to the front page, we've got a list of our features on the left hand, and one of them is newsletters. And if you click on the newsletters link, it will show you all the many different newsletters we have. But Hall Pass is one of our favorite newsletters. It has a very high open rate and a lot of engagement with our school board members who get it. It goes to about 60,000 school board members.
And last but not least, on our tutorial questions here, I don't know if I emphasize enough that Ballotpedia is a 501c3 and really can always use the donations to help support the cause. If our listeners want to make a contribution to Ballotpedia, how do they do that?
You can also do that from the front page. We've got a pretty conspicuous donate button. We get a lot of donations from people through that online portal who we've never met in person. And once you go into the online donations portal, you're offered the opportunity for a one-time donation or for monthly giving. And we're getting to where we have about 500 monthly donors. So all of that adds up, and it really just fuels the engine, because it will be, it's a big job to eventually figure out how we can cover all the school board elections, all the school board members, and then city council and county commission. So that's about a 5-year battle for us to figure out how to do that. But every little bit helps. We love having new donors.
Well, thank you for your time today. Congratulations on the survey. And I know if anyone can make things better, it's going to be you.
Thanks.
Well, thank you for joining us again for this episode. We mentioned earlier, all politics is local. Educating our kids is critical. It doesn't matter to me if you're a parent or just someone who lives in the area. There are so many fascinating issues circulating around school boards right now. Make a point to get educated on these topics. If we don't fix these particular issues, we're really never going to fix much of anything. Thank you for joining us.